both sides, the Soviets and the Americans, were scared of the other side putting nukes in space. If you can show that you've got a claim that could actually potentially make you eligible to own a planet's land, somebody's going to want to update the laws that are deficient there. And I kind of got aware of this thing called the Outer Space Treaty, which is the only law that governs everything we do in space. Check out this guy. Thinks he owns Mars. Bless him.
This Anglo-Irish doctor from Surrey, England, holds the world's strongest legal claim to Mars. He's in contact with the United Nations, and his claim is on its way to the European Court of Human Rights, having already finished in the UK High Courts. Help him stop the nuclear armament of space. Okay, all right, let me explain this a bit. If you or any of your loved ones were alive in the 1950s or the 1960s, you or they probably remember the Cold War and the space race.
The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
At this time, people were rightfully terrified of the prospect of nuclear war. The Second World War had not long ended. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were still fresh upon the world stage. And the US and Russia were racing to weaponize space. Put a man on the moon. Now, in 2020, you might think that threat of nuclear war has passed and the world has other things to worry about. And yet the technology that killed 215,000 Japanese citizens in just 2 bombings not only still exists, but has multiplied in destructive power by 3,800 times. The largest nuclear bomb ever being created being the Tsar Bomba of Russia. If it were dropped on a city such as London, it would not only utterly destroy the entire city, killing everyone in it on impact, it would leave people with life-threatening third-degree radiation burns up to 37 miles away. Not forgetting the devastating radioactive fallout that would occur after, affecting approximately 3,000 square miles. But we have nothing to worry about, right? Well, it would seem that existential threat might gradually be returning, only this time, rather than launching ballistic missiles from the ground, the next best opportunity for the world's most powerful nations is to arm orbital satellites and point them downwards to face us. No, this isn't the work of science fiction. This is the capability of military organizations such as the US Space Force, founded in 2019, and the Russian Space Force, founded in 2015. Although it did exist for a few years before and it's just sort of been rebranded a few times. The only thing that stands in their way is an old document thrown together by the United Nations in 1967 called the Outer Space Treaty. Now, unfortunately, in this modern world, this treaty basically isn't worth the paper that it's written on and is essentially being ignored by the nations that it was set to contain. Through the means of legislation such as the US Space Act and the Artemis Accords, which the UK has just agreed to. There are even rumours that Russians have actually started testing space-based missiles. So how do we stop the nuclear weaponization of space? Well, we update the Outer Space Treaty. In comes Dr. Phil.
It's the same committee at the UN that would deal with a claim to Mars that actually has to update the Space Treaty and could, in theory, update the Outer Space Treaty to keep it relevant and current and incorporate provisions for space mining.
Dr. Philip Davies, a mild-mannered, charismatic general practitioner with a background in aerospace medicine, found a loophole in international law. A loophole that, if unaddressed by the United Nations, would effectively give Dr. Phil Mars. The best way to prevent this from happening, update the Outer Space Treaty to cater for this modern world. So how does Dr. Phil hold the world's strongest legal claim to Mars? Well, under international law, which includes land in outer space, there are 2 options for someone to claim land. The first, find unclaimed land, go there and settle on it. Eventually you'll own it, much like squatters' rights. The second option applies to inhabitable, barren land that is hard to get to and lacking in resources, land such as the surface of Mars. Now, to claim such land as your own, all you have to do is prove your intent to possess that land. The best way to prove your intent is to affect that land in a way that could eventually make it habitable by humans. Now, in order to make a planet habitable by humans, it needs an oxygen-rich atmosphere. What creates oxygen? Plants. And what do plants need to photosynthesize? Carbon dioxide. Luckily, there is an abundance of carbon dioxide frozen in the polar ice caps at the North and South poles on Mars. Carbon dioxide just waiting to be released into the atmosphere in a process known as terraforming. Now, to terraform Mars and release the frozen carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, you have a couple of options. The first option is the quick way, as suggested by Elon Musk.
How would you warm Mars up? You know, it's a long way away from the sun.
There's the fast way and the slow way.
Okay. Give me the fast way.
The fast way is drop thermonuclear weapons over the poles.
You're a supervillain. That's what a supervillain does.
Yeah. The second option involves heating Mars gently from afar, which is what Dr. Phil has been doing for the last 10 years. 2 or 3 times a week, Dr. Phil will step outside with his auto-tracking telescope and one of the most powerful portable lasers in the world. Watching flight trackers to avoid aircraft, he will point his laser at Mars for 10 to 20 minutes at a time. And although minuscule, the radiation of his laser marginally warms the atmosphere of Mars, the effect of which will release that precious carbon dioxide from the ice and into the air. Albeit just a few molecules at a time, Dr. Phil's efforts over the last 10 years to terraform Mars and make it habitable for humankind allows him the right to claim Mars as his own under international law. Dr. Phil's campaign for an updated space treaty has now spanned the entire planet, with over 150,000 people named as co-claimants, including myself, who have all been allocated a plot of land on Mars. The campaign has recently hit an astronomical milestone, becoming a pan-multinational claim, with a co-claimant from every single one of the 195 countries on Earth. That includes people from the Vatican and even North Korea. This is a huge deal, as a pan-multinational claim is the only conceivable format for anyone ever legally claiming celestial land. As of right now, this claim is filed with the UN, making it the only celestial claim to have ever been acknowledged, as confirmed by the Chief of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNOSA. But despite the magnitude of this claim, despite the support that the claim has, Dr. Phil needs names on the Mars register. The claim has now finished in the UK High Courts, the fees for which were all covered by Dr. Phil so as not to be sponging off of the taxpayer, especially during a pandemic. The claim is now on its way to the European Court of Human Rights. Dr. Phil now has just 6 months to prepare legal justification for his application, and in order to strengthen his case as much as possible, he needs everyone he can possibly reach noted as a co-claimant on the Mars register. To cover his substantial legal fees, Dr. Phil sells claims to Martian land on themartians.org. Financial support to his claim is extremely welcome, considering without funds for legal fees, there is no campaign. But just being on the list is just as important. Even if you can't contribute financially, Dr. Phil will still give you a free voucher and add you to the register if you just follow him on Twitter @JoinTheMartians. You never know, providing the United Nations adheres to their own laws, you and your descendants could end up with a plot of land on Mars, or you could help protect the Earth with a fair and prosperous outer space treaty, allowing commercial mining of much-needed resources from asteroids and other planets, but preventing the nuclear weaponization of space. Phil and I speak often, so I'll be sure to keep everyone up to date on the campaign, giving summaries such as this whenever there is any substantial news. My colleague Ben and I will also be following Dr. Phil over the coming years with the intention of making a full documentary on his work when it's all said and done. So make sure you subscribe to this channel on YouTube and follow Dr. Phil on Twitter. Let's see what happens next.